Hello, how are you doing? It's Gabrielle here, and I'm going to be talking about my philosophy today and how that ties into what I'm doing with the Menopause Running Club. And I think the first thing that I want to talk about is how important mindset is to me. And for as long as I can remember, I've believed that age won't hold me back. And I still feel like that now. And I can really, if I take myself back in time to when I first was aware of that, I was probably in my mid-20s, and I just had this sense of never wanting to age in a conventional or expected way. And I think that's probably always been a part of what I've believed in my life. And I think having those beliefs is really, really important, because when you believe something, you look for evidence that that's true and that that's possible. And that's what I've been doing since I was that age, which is a long time, which is quite funny really. Maybe I always wanted to be a 54-year-old woman. Well, I got my dream, I got my wish. But I think, joking apart, I think this is something that we all need to adopt a mindset now, that our age won't hold us back. And that can take a little bit of work, can't it? Because I think when we go through the menopause process, we can feel that we're losing a lot of things. We can feel that we're going towards sort of age and our perceptions of, we're going towards an older age, and our perceptions of an older age, through years of conditioning, is that we will become less capable, weaker, less fit, whatever you want to think of. We'll have to do safer things and hold back our ambitions and dreams. And we really have to work quite hard to, I wouldn't say fight against that, but just to ignore that, just to cut that off from our awareness. And, that's very much what I do. And I really nurture this belief that, age, changing, lack of estrogen, flatlining estrogen doesn't actually matter. As long as I understand it, and as long as I understand how to work with it and then just crack on, then I'll be okay. And I look for stories. I look for stories of other women who are in their 60s, I always look for older than me, who are in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and doing incredible things, because that makes me think, well, if they can, I can. And so this philosophy is, this part of my philosophy, this mindset, cultivating this mindset is really key. And like a lot of things, it takes work. It's not necessarily like chores or jobs, but you just need to keep that belief alive. That's really important. And I just know that, so I make sure that I do things that keep that alive. And when I was at the beginning of my menopause journey, that sort of mindset didn't quite work for me at the beginning, because I was almost in denial. I was thinking, well, I'm not going to actually go through menopause. I'm not joking. It's not going to affect me. So I'll just crack on and as I was, and ignore it, head in the sand. Now, of course, that wasn't true. And then once I start to okay, it is happening, then it was fighting it. It was almost like an aggressive stance of, well, I'm not going to do that, and putting pressure on myself to just carry on. And that wasn't possible either. And when I sort of resigned myself to the fact that I couldn't do anything about it, I couldn't stop that as a process, and then I started to become curious about what's happening, what's going on, and learning. That was a shift in my mindset then, because I started to lean into it and, understand, accept it, understand what's going on. And that gave me power. Now, part of my journey, as you already know if you watched some of the other videos, is that part of my journey through menopause was to become a personal trainer, because I could recognize that what other PTs that I'd worked with before, the information that I could find on the internet, etc., wasn't giving me the information that I knew I needed for how I felt. You really notice that your body feels different, what works for you feels different, and you can't understand it at the beginning, but you can feel that change, and you can feel that you need something that you've not found. So I decided to become a personal trainer. And over that process, and I had not done anything like that at school. This was a totally new area for me. So I was learning all about anatomy and physiology and the impact of exercise and the way food works and all the rest of it. And that blew my mind, because I, up until that point, had been exercised to lose weight, ate to lose weight, and suddenly to understand the real impact that food, exercise had on your body was just like, wow, this is incredible. And when I understood that, plus what was changing in our bodies from a menopause point of view in terms of our hormones and how that was changing our physiology, and could see how there were very specific strategies around food and exercise that we could use to mean that we didn't have those hormone changes, those physiological changes didn't have to mean that we went into this automatic decline. Then I suddenly had this most enormous respect for exercise and nutrition. And still to this day, I just see them as incredibly powerful tools that we all can use. And I love that, you know. And so that's a huge part of my philosophy, to see food and exercise as really powerful tools that put us back in control of our bodies now. And that's key, because, part of why I think a lot of people struggle going through menopause is that sense of loss of control. And you really can feel like things are changing and you do not understand, because you've spent the other 40 years of your body really understanding it, and suddenly everything just seems to, a switch seems to flip very quickly. And this, for me, exercise and nutrition has been the thing that has restored my control. And that is a really strong part of my philosophy, and really strong in my mind, really at the forefront of my mind, and really shapes how I think about both of those things. And that's really key, because we can look at food as something we have to restrict ourselves if we want to lose weight, or we can't have this or we can't have that. And exercise is hard, and no one wants to be in a gym when they want to be running, and we can have all these negative things around those things. But when you start to cultivate this idea, this real belief that no, these are powerful tools that actually literally hold the key to us having this amazing life, then it starts to change the way you frame those things and how you make them fit into your life. And I think another key, when you a sort of leading into that was the fact that if your mindset is around being able to age well and having at our disposal these really powerful tools of food and exercise, the next part of my philosophy was really knowing that this could be a new chapter. And that was exciting, because there was a time in my past, like 7 years ago, something like that, where I really started to get this sense of wanting change, like really desperately deep feeling of like, oh my God, is this my life? I just want something else. And I didn't understand it. And I actually felt quite guilty about it, because, I have a wonderful partner, I have wonderful children and stepchildren, I had a lovely house in a lovely area, security in my job. And to feel that I was almost still had all these lovely things, and I was healthy, and to feel that I had all these lovely things, but I wanted something else. There were times when I literally wanted to just walk out into a camper van and go. And it was quite a strange thing to feel like this real deep sense of dissatisfaction and wanting something else. And I remember one day, I can picture myself actually in my room on this exact day, sat in front of my laptop, and for some reason this word, or this phrase, midlife transformation, popped into my head. Now, I hadn't read that anywhere. I don't know even where that came from, but suddenly it just came into my head. So I started Googling and looking to see what that meant. And I found a few things, and nothing quite resonated. But what did happen is that was like a little seed that got planted, or a little chip that got planted somewhere, that was thinking, this is what I need, this is what I want, I don't understand what it is, I don't understand how you get it, I feel really stuck right now, I want that over there, I don't know what it is, but also I don't know how to get there. So in a way it made me feel a little bit more lost to begin with, but really I knew there was something, and that always starts your brain to work. I love this magical process of how your brain works. You plant a little idea, you really anchor it in, because you know that's what you want. You don't know any answers, but somehow your brain sort of has the magic to work that out, and that is what happened. And and that is key, because I think I have seen with some of my clients in the past who have come to me to get healthy, to lose weight, to do exercise, all these things that on paper they know they should do because of reading it, and they know that they're not doing it. But they are still at that point where they're stuck in their old life. And there's a real dissatisfaction that comes when you're stuck there. And they haven't found their next thing or their new thing. And I think that can really sort of pull at you and really ruin your motivation to actually make any changes, because you feel in some sort of bind that you can't escape. And that can affect quite a lot about the choices that you make around your health and around your well-being, because you're just not in a good place. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, we can get to a point when we know our lives change. We might be approaching retirement, or our kids are growing up, or we might be thinking about being grandparents, or things that just like blow your mind, that you just really can't quite imagine that you're there. And you're sort of almost scared to let go of your old life and leap into something else. Because quite often or certainly for me, I felt like that to have this new thing, I literally had to, you know, leave my partner, send my daughter to live with the dad, sell the house, buy a van and go off on my own and just start from scratch. And it's not, maybe that's right for some people, but it wasn't for me, and it didn't need to be that dramatic. But once this sort of started to work, all I realised that I needed to do was actually carve out a little bit of time for me, time for myself, to do things, to discover what I did want to do. And eventually that led us, not quite to running, but it was, we started paddleboarding, we started cycling. It ended up being me and Tim, my partner, doing things together. And suddenly it's just like, oh, I want to be out at the weekend, I want to cycle through Europe, I want to run through mountains. And suddenly I just had this thing that I was really excited about. And that gave me some focus, and that started making things fall together. Because when you feel like you don't know what you want from life, and you're not happy, and you're just focused on what's doing your head in, you know, you don't think, oh, I'll go and eat a healthy meal. No, you want to go and eat chocolate in the cupboard because you're just so fed up. You need something to make you feel better. You don't want to go in the gym and throw a few weights around. You want to lie on the sofa and watch someone else who's escaped and wish it was you. But when you find that little thing, that little goal, that's something that suddenly lights you back up again and gives you that energy and gives you that thing where it's like, wow, yes, that's it, that's what I want to do. Well, suddenly that changes how you think about what you do. And that tied into this, me understanding the power of exercise and nutrition. It's like, okay, if I want to go and, you know, run up mountains, then I need to be fit, I need to be strong, I need to have good muscles, I need good food, I need good recovery. And then that suddenly makes you go into the kitchen, go into your weekly routine and want to do all these things. And that's a huge transformation. But sometimes you can't quite figure out how to get there. You know you want to change, but how do you get there? Well, what you have to be able to do, and again, this is sort of part of the sort of 4 key things here. There's the mindset, there's this recognizing that food and exercise is so powerful, and then the second thing is the third thing is learning then how to prioritize yourself, because quite often we don't let ourselves have time for ourselves. And this blows my mind a bit, actually. We all do it. I've never met anyone who just found it easy just to do nothing. Men, yes, women less so. And we can really struggle with actually giving ourselves some time and some space just to figure out what we want, you know. And you can't, if your mind is full of stuff and you're constantly on the go and you're constantly trying to juggle this really stressful life, which this stage of our life nearly always is, of course you can't figure out, you can't think straight, you can't work out what you want for your tea, never mind what you want to do in the next 5 years. And I did some coaching with a wonderful woman called Bev a few years ago, and she came to me in a real bind as well. She was a runner, she actually ran a running club, and she was just really struggling. She was having a really tough time with menopause. Even work had changed all her working arrangements because her sleep was so bad, her energy levels were so bad. She was trying to run this running club. She had a family, she obviously had the house stuff to do. And she was just really struggling. She was gaining weight, she was struggling with her running, she wanted to start strength training, could not fit anything in. So we had this like coaching session. And I remember saying to her, and I think she was expecting that I would give her a diet and exercise plan and go away with. But I could really see that she just didn't have the capacity physically to actually do any more than she already was. So I said to her instead, how much time do you actually spend doing things just for yourself? And I really I love asking people that question. And she's like, not very much. I said, okay, so if there was one little thing that you could do that you're not doing, that you really want to do, what would that be? Just something small. I said, well, I've got a pile of books on this table in my landing that I want to read, and I've just not got round to reading them, and I always walk past and I wish I could just read the book. I said, right, that's it. So all I want you to do is at 8 o'clock at night, turn off your phone, go on 20 minutes, just go and get one of these books and go and sit somewhere and read for 20 minutes. Do you think you can do that? He's like, yeah, I can. I said, great. So you do that. That's all you have to do, and we'll catch up in in a couple of months' time. We actually had 2 catch-ups, one in a month and then one maybe within another 2 or 3 months. And basically, it was like the key or the catalyst to her completely changing her life, because she did what she was told, and she went and turned her phone off, and she sat and read a book for 20 minutes. And she just thought, why have I not done this before? This is actually not that difficult. So, and once you do something small like that, you then think, and this is exactly what happened to her, she thought, what else can I do? And started trying to think about what little bits of time and space she could carve out for herself in her day. And slowly but surely things started to change. And I remember one day, I can't remember how old her daughter was, but she was like in her late teens. And she was sat there reading her book one day in her allocated time, and the daughter came up to her and she didn't even look at her, she just put her hand up and said, I'm reading my book, I've got another 10 minutes, come back. And just sent this daughter away. So she had really gotten good at doing these things and setting these boundaries. And what started to happen, we started to think, what else do I want to do? So she bought one of those cold plunges and put that outside her house, so one of these sort of ice baths. So she fancied doing that, so she started doing that. And slowly but surely, she started to realise that she could find this time in her day. She didn't leave a job, she didn't leave a husband, she didn't leave a daughter. She just found this way to carve out these times in her day. She started eating healthier. She joined a gym. That was something that she had really struggled to do. She started going hiking and going off with people to these walks where then they would go and find these like wild swimming spots, go for a dunk and then walk back. And so many different things started to change in her life. She was losing weight, she was enjoying her running more, she was feeling like she was making more progress, and it all started with one little change. And the sort of moral of this story, which goes back into this philosophy, is this idea that we have to learn how to prioritise ourselves. And just giving ourselves that little bit of space can be so rewarding and so restorative, but can then start to be the thing we need to do to unlock those bigger ideas of what we want to do, because we start to get the physical space and the headspace from our day-to-day life, and then we find out what we've got. And this is really important. If we want to change how we are now, if we want to change the status quo from struggling to doing things that we really enjoy, and we're here mostly because a huge part of that is what running gives us, then we have to look at how we move things around and how we then allow ourselves to create this new version of ourselves by getting clearer about what we want, getting clearer about why we want it, and finding the time to prioritise ourselves and being prepared to do things differently, because what worked before doesn't work now. And, I think for me, what was really interesting was once I started to go through this process of all these things, and then I started to get clearer about what I wanted to do and the excitement about running. Cycling is like a joint thing that me and my partner do, so that's part of it as well. Running is just me, and doing these wonderful things. Well, then you start to think about how am I going to make that happen, and that's when like a light comes back in your life, which you can really lose when you go through midlife. And that's when your motivation comes back to start making changes. And hey presto, because food and exercise is so powerful, you start to feel phenomenal again anyway. And I suppose the last thing about my philosophy, if it's about mindset, if it's about this power, respecting the power of food and nutrition, it's about prioritizing yourself, allowing this to be a new chapter and leaning into that. The last thing is enjoying the process. And, when I was younger, I really would have been following in a real glutton for a lose a stone in a week, not a week, no, it was never one of them, lose a stone in 4 weeks, or get an amazing backside in 6 weeks. That never, I've done loads of those things, never managed either of them. But now I see things very differently. It's about a journey. And actually, when you get to this stage of your life, that feels really excited. I've literally, before I recorded this, come off a call with a client who is in her early 60s, and she's just getting really close to, we're just at the final stages of her training for this marathon, and I've helped her with the nutrition, I've helped her with the strength training, and she's just done her, a 20-mile run, and she was absolutely buzzing about how she was and how well she'd done, and really full of confidence, and she'd never run this far in her life, so this is a real first for her to be getting to this age and able to run non-stop for 20 miles and know that she's going to be fine for this marathon. And then she was saying, and when I've done the marathon, then I want to start getting really strong, and then I want to do a half marathon and get faster. And this is what's really exciting now, is that we can start to make these changes in our lives with food and with exercise, and running's an exciting goal for a lot of us. And we can get to this stage in our lives when we don't feel like we've peaked. We feel like we're just getting started. And that is so exciting. And we can, when we change things around, that's exactly what happens. And so then we're not into, run a marathon in 20 weeks. No, we're in this fantastic journey and process of actually thinking, oh, I've just run 20 miles and what can I do next? Last year, I did this 2-day 100-mile thing that combined running and biking and kayaking, and I remember coming out of this and just feeling on top of the world, thinking, oh my God, if I can do this, what else can I do? And that's exactly what she was saying to me. If I can do this, what else can I do? And now my mind's going crazy thinking, well, actually, what can I do? And you're starting to look for it, and then you start working towards these goals. So this is a really empowering thing, to feel like you can get to this age, we can get to this life stage and be so excited that we can go from strength to strength. And that's what my philosophy is all about. So I guess that comes quite full circle, is so actually believing that my age will never hold me back. And you can see how that feeds into this process and all the things that you're working on, that you're aware of, this little loop that feeds into that cycle, and how when you sort of have this philosophy and have this mindset, and about these little processes that you need to do that sort of work you towards that, you actually do get into this most incredible journey. That's really exciting. And it's, it doesn't matter what you can and can't do now. It doesn't matter, because it's what you can do. It's the fact that you're getting onto one step and really excited about the next step, and that's what you're going for. And I think that's just, what else could you ask for? That makes me literally excited to get out of bed every day, and that's what we want. All right, thank you for watching that one. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.